Hello, everyone. Ralph Ventre here in the NEC Front Row studio, ready to talk some women's hoops. It's the dawn of a new season. We will look ahead. We will look back, talk some history, some predictions, top players, things to watch. We'll do it all in the next few minutes here on NEC Front Row, and we will do it with Craig D'Amico, play-by-play man for NEC women's basketball on Front Row. Craig, great to have you here in studio with us. I know you're probably more excited than anyone that a new NEC women's basketball season is on the horizon. Let's open it up by just giving some storylines to look for in this season.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here, Ralph. Always a pleasure to sit down and talk some women's hoops with you as this new season is upon us. And I love the new studio. You guys really have some impressive digs. But yeah, there are some fantastic storylines and this year in NEC women's basketball with the way St. Francis Brooklyn won the championship when we last left things off at the end of last year, and then all their top players kind of left and moved on. A lot of the main storylines revolve around Robert Morris. The fact that first, Sal Buscaglia announced prior to last year's tournament that he's going to be leaving at the end of this season. So obviously a lot of motivation for the players to win for him. So
there you go, right off the top. Storyline number one, Robert Morris is the preseason favorite. They have a legendary head coach. He's announced his retirement at season's end. Will Sal's swan song, so to speak, result in another Northeast Conference championship? So that's definitely a big storyline.
I said,
what do you think, though? Yes, no? You're gonna hold out on that one?
We'll give predictions at the end, but I said during the post-game show in last year's championship when we were there live on NEC Front Row, I said the way that the championship game ended last year is a lot of trouble for the rest of the league this year because Robert Morris brings virtually everybody back from last year's team, 1 year older, 1 year wiser. They already have the motivation of playing for their coach. They have the motivation of the bad taste left in their mouth of losing the championship on their home floor with their best player hurt in the second half. So I really think they're on. If they play with a lot that kind of motivation. I mean, we saw the Kansas City Royals, unfortunately, to your Mets, Ralph, playing with a lot of redemption on their mind after the way the year before ended, rolling through this baseball season and winning the World Series. That's kind of where Robert Morris is right now, in that they want to get back to where they were and they want to finish it off the right way for their coach at the end of this season. So it's a road to redemption for Robert Morris this year.
Of course, the bitter Phillies fan has to needle the Mets fan. We won't talk any more baseball here in the Front Row studio, but basically, storyline one, will Robert Morris finish that unfinished business?
Absolutely.
Now, storyline number two, I think I heard you hinting at something with the St. Francis Terriers. Obviously a young team this year. They lose 4 starters on what was a veteran-laden team who made that Cinderella run. So there you kind of have a storyline that the defending champion was picked to finish 9th in the preseason coaches poll.
And yet Central was picked 9th last year and they ended up winning the regular season, so who knows?
So that actually, it's a storyline every year, is who, because of the parity in this league, we see the script unfold. Every year someone comes from the bottom, comes from the lower half of that coach's poll, those sometimes erroneous predictions, and challenges for the Northeast Conference title. So the storyline would be, my question, which team is it that's finished in the lower half of the poll that is going to challenge for the title this year? Or maybe take a couple of teams who finished in the lower half of the poll and tell me what do they have to do to be that surprise team that challenges for the title, to go from 9th to 1st like Central Connecticut State did under Burl Piper last year.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned it. Every year there seems to be that surprises. And last year, remember, Bryant was picked towards the bottom too, and both Bryant and Central Connecticut ended up at the top of the poll. It was like the standings flipped upside down. This year, I do like 2 teams in particular that are kind of picked towards the bottom in the preseason by the coaches. I think St. Francis Brooklyn is a lot better than 9th. I do think that they're going to be not only in the mix for a playoff spot, I think that they're going to be somewhere, maybe competing for a top 4, but definitely 5-6 range. a lot of the talent that they have, like a Becky Pun, like an Alex Delaney, they got time last year coming off the bench and coming into the game. So I think that experience, now their focus is going to be on them. And Leah Fetchko, she is a player who didn't really get a lot of headlines because there were senior players on that team. But she's the engine that drove the whole thing.
Let's be honest here. She doesn't get a lot of headlines because she plays defense.
She plays
we know the point scoring.
Defense, yes.
We know the point scoring is what sells.
But now she's going to be looked at in an offensive role too. So they're going to look at her on both ends of the floor this year.
And the other thing I can tell you about the Terriers, Craig, you don't have to worry about them being hungry and having that drive, because John Thurston, since he's been in Brooklyn Heights, really, what a renaissance and
unbelievable.
What an attitude that team has taken on and developed.
And I don't think that's going to change just because, there's 7 freshmen that are coming in this year, so a lot of new faces, but I don't think that attitude is going to change at all.
Now, two teams.
I was going to say that, and the second team I was going to add as kind of a newcomer to the mix is the Wagner Seahawks, because kind of like St. Francis Brooklyn last year, they bring a lot of returning players back. They're fast, they're athletic, they can score, they're pesky on defense. They have a new grad student coming in this year, so I really like Wagner as maybe a team that can surprise and challenge for a top 4 spot maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to believe we're almost done with this first segment, and Jasmine Nawaje's name is just coming up now. Of course, the Wagner Jr., you want to talk about a scoring sensation. Number 2 in scoring average in Division I last year. Passed the 1,000 point mark as a sophomore, something you don't see. Well on her way to 2,000 points, you have to believe, if she stays healthy. Jordan Peck is a nice complimentary piece. She can score the ball as well for Wagner. So, yeah, I'd be interested to see if Wagner can take the next step as well, Craig. Just one more storyline I want you to touch on. You mentioned about Central Connecticut and Bryant both exceeding outsiders' expectations last year, finishing in a tie for first place. Now, both of those teams, Bryant may be the most experienced, most veteran team in the league. Central Connecticut returns Camden Musgrave, Aaliyah Epps, TJ Malone. Two teams who return a lot of firepower, two teams who finished in a tie for first last year but didn't get to the mountaintop in the tournament. Can they continue the success? I mean, that has to be a key question, a key storyline heading into this season. And quite frankly, I'm interested to know what you think about it.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by this too. And Kayla Miller for Central Connect, she's the only one who started every game last year. And
sorry about that, Kayla. I can't believe I did.
But you know what? Coach Piper did a phenomenal job last year. I'll never forget sitting at the table with her at Media Day last year at Barclays Center, and she flat out said, "We're not 9." She had a confidence about what her team was doing, almost like we know something nobody else knows. And they went out and they proved it last year during the season, had a phenomenal run, and that group together played phenomenal as a team all season long. And now I'm interested to see how they do with now the bullseye on their back. They're not going to surprise anybody anymore because now they're picked towards the top of the conference. So how do they play? I think being that they bring a lot of key players back, they lost Kaylee Watras, they lost Harrington, so they lost some key pieces, but I still believe they'll be one of the top teams in the league. And then on the other side for Bryant, you mentioned it, they're bringing back the reigning NEC Player of the Year in Rucker. They do have a lot of talent there. Their Rookie of the Year Bailey is coming back for her sophomore campaign. So I definitely think if we're talking, challengers to the throne, if we talked Robert Morris earlier, who can maybe catch them on their redemption mission, I definitely think those are two of the top challengers to Robert Morris this year.
All right, well, key storylines, we have that squared away. Let's look more into some individual players this year. The particular question being, are there any possible breakthrough performances that you see? Any quote unquote under the radar performers, or maybe a bench player last year, but this year you see her developing into an all-conference caliber player or a candidate for all-conference? I know you mentioned St. Francis Brooklyn, Alex Delaney in particular. Her scoring average was not gaudy by any means last year, but I know she hit a couple of big shots.
She hit a couple of big shots.
Stony Brook at the buzzer, and of course a couple of big 3 balls in the championship game at Robert Morris. So I'll toss the ball in your court now. give me the breakthrough performers. Is Alex Delaney one of the people who are on your list?
Well, I have a couple of kind of breakthrough players that I give. The first one, we mentioned her already, Leah Fetchko. I think now that she's stepping up in that, that spotlight role, defensive end, but also now on the offense, they're going to look to her for a lot of points too. As a senior, she's going to be the go-to player, so I think that she's going to, really take over that team. Teresa Wagner for Bryant, I don't think she gets enough credit. Senior guard, started every game last year, was top 10 in scoring. So if we're looking, where's Bryant going to make up some of the points lost with some of their graduating players last year? She's maybe the player to kind of step it up a little bit.
Well, Bryant, though, Craig, they return 3, if not 4, players who averaged double figures in scoring last year. You have Rucker, you have the reigning Rookie of the Year, Ivory Bailey. You mentioned Tirsa Winder. So obviously, if I'm Mary Burke,
she's feeling quite comfortable.
Yeah, I'm not worried about where I'm getting points from because I think I have plenty of it on my roster.
And then a couple of others from out in Pennsylvania. Aisha Brock, now with Hayward graduated, the premier player for St. Francis, the Red Flash. That's a prized premier position to be in the Northeast Conference history. So now they're going to really look to her for the scoring and to run that fast-paced offense that I know Coach Haig likes to run. Megan Smith and Rebecca Navarro for Robert Morris, 2 players that kind of go under the radar, but they played huge in last year's postseason as Robert Morris was making their run. A sophomore and a junior, respectively, forward and a guard, respectively. So I think those 2 players, as if Robert Morris looks to make their run this year, going to maybe step up and add their names towards those all-conference selections.
St. Francis and the word history together. We'll get into some historical conversation in just a bit. Still want to focus on this upcoming season for now. We have our storylines. We have our quote-unquote under-the-radar players who Craig is confident will break out and be all-conference candidates this year. And now, to wrap up this first portion of our show, any particular games, whether non-conference games or league games, we know the league games won't start until January, but what do you have circled on your calendar? Which are the games that you want to make sure you're not going to miss, whether it's watching on Front Row, announcing on Front Row, or just, I know you like to travel once in a while, go out, if you have a day off, go out to an NEC venue and take in a game. So,
a day off? What's that? I don't know.
Exactly. No days off really in Craig D'Amico's life. We know this. But tell us, what does your schedule entail? Which of these hot button matchups do you have scheduled?
Yeah, there are a couple of interesting non-conference matchups to definitely check out. The home games available on NEC Front Row. We'll throw a plug in there. Central Connecticut.
Free and in HD.
That's right.
Free and in HD, yes.
And now with these wonderful studios here. In December, Central Connecticut State plays an interesting non-conference schedule. They play at Hartford. Jennifer Rosati always has a competitive team, so I think that's going to be an interesting matchup. And then Central Connecticut goes to Fordham right before the Christmas break.
Oh, a little bit of a grudge match there.
See Coach Gately again, yeah. So.
And last year, obviously, those teams met twice. First in the regular season, and Fordham really handled Central well. Central was a different team at that time. At the end of the season, they met in the WNIT, the postseason WNIT. Central was leading for the entire game until the last minute of play. Fordham somehow, with a Houdini act, escapes with the victory. Great matchup, 2 great coaches.
Rose
obviously,
Hill Gym, great atmosphere. That's going to be
a classic venue. Absolutely.
December 20th.
December 20th.
Mark the calendar.
Central at Fordham. Burl Piper, Steph Gately, 2 wonderful coaches.
And the other one I had in mind, Thursday, December 3rd, Sacred Heart at St. John. Sacred Heart the last couple of years have had some interesting non-conference games against Big East opponents. So now going to
pummeled
St. John.
Villanova last year,
That's
72-49.
right. So I'm interested in that one. Yep.
So they hit Villanova hard. I remember a couple years ago, I believe they lost to Villanova in overtime.
Close, yes.
And they lost to St. John's in overtime, I believe, that same season. So yeah, they're always competitive, and it's a little bit of an up game for them. Definitely a game. If Sacred Heart has aspirations of the NCAA tournament, this is definitely a game for their resume.
Absolutely.
For that that what do you call it? Your team sheet that the committee reviews. Okay, so what did you say that? What was the date on that one?
That
the 3rd?
was the
December 3rd.
Thursday the 3rd.
So we got December 3rd, Sacred Heart and St. John's. We have December 20th, Central Connecticut and Fordham. What else you got?
I would say in conference play, the first TV game on ESPN3 is Robert Morris and Bryant, the top 2 teams in the preseason poll. So that's going to be an interesting watch. And then I'm also, it's a different circumstances, different players. I'm also looking to see St. Francis Brooklyn traveling to Central Connecticut State for the first time since last year's double overtime game. And I know
Maybe
it's not the same, but it's going to be interesting to see that.
I don't know if we'll ever see something that rivals that again. I mean, what an incredible game coming down to the wire. You mentioned double overtime, but the way that the game was sent into double overtime with, I think it was 0.6 seconds to go, and the crazy three-pointer by TJ.
Only 2 career threes up until that point. That was something else. I don't know anybody that could have predicted that.
Now, Craig, leave us with your predictions for the 2015-16 NEC women's basketball season. Player of the year, defensive player of the year, coach of the year, and who will meet in the 2016 championship game, which will air live for the 9th year running on ESPNU, the 9th straight year that the NEC women's basketball title game will reach a national audience. Who will America be watching when we get to that juncture?
Okay, I'll have that for you. First, Coach of the Year, I'm going with Coach Sal Buscaglia. The sentimental favorite, I would say, but he obviously, as we talked about, he does a great job coaching too, which would give him that award. Defensive Player of the Year, Erica Livermore. I think FDU's picked in the top 4. They haven't finished in the top 4 in the league standings since they won the league in 1993. And I think if they are going to challenge for one of those top 4 spots, Livermore is going to have to be the Defensive Player of the Year and have to be a Player of the Year candidate too. And so I think she's in there. She won it last year, so I'd put her back in there as well. Rookie of the Year is always tough to forecast just because you don't really see how everyone's going to adjust coming from high school to college. So I'm going to hold off with Rookie of the Year, but I will say that there are a lot of exciting newcomers. We mentioned St. Francis Brooklyn, a 7 freshman. Sacred Heart always likes to implement their young players right away. Aisha Williams a few years ago getting an opportunity at the point guard.
Now, we've added a Most Improved Player award this year.
Well, that's tough too.
But you were telling me earlier in the show about all these breakout candidates. You were telling me so-and-so is going to score 15 a game, so-and-so. Which one of those is going to be the most improved player?
Well, it's not necessarily that they're improved. It's just that they were kind of under the radar, and now they're kind of moving up in terms of a different role. So much improved is always a tough one to forecast. I like to see how kind of the games play out first.
Craigie is taking the politically correct route on this one.
But
he knows he has to announce some games this year.
I do have a player of the year for you. I do have a player of the year. I could kind of be decisive with this. I mentioned, I think Livermore is going to be a candidate. By the way, that's a great story too, because really she shouldn't be here this year if she didn't get hurt a couple years ago and get the extra year of eligibility. But the fact that she is on the team with Cruz, with some of the other pieces that they have, makes FDU a big-time contender this year. So I think it's just interesting how that all worked out, almost like a blessing in disguise. So I think.
We understand Livermore is a phenomenal player. She's a double-double machine.
Nikki Stamalampru, Player of the Year.
Okay,
mark it down.
I was waiting for that. You're beating around the bush, telling me this about Livermore. I know all that about Livermore.
But we haven't really talked about her, so I just want to give her a little plug.
Phenomenal player, and if you folks get a chance, go check out the special NEC feature story that we did on Front Row last year about Erica Livermore and her road back to basketball.
I will say you guys have some amazing features. I look forward to seeing a lot of the ones that I know are in production or post-production now, getting ready for the upcoming season.
All right. I know.
And the final, because you asked me about the final too, so I don't want you to get on me with that. I'll give you the 2 teams in the final. My prediction, Robert Morris, Bryant. These two teams have eliminated each other 3 straight years. 2013, Bryant over Robert Morris, final game of the season just to get into the tournament, knock Robert Morris out. And in the last 2 years, it's been Robert Morris knocking Bryant out in the semifinals. So I just think they're destined to meet in the final. That's a great story.
Help me out here, though, Craig. Robert Morris and Bryant, weren't those the top 2 finishers in the preseason coaches poll?
Yes, they were.
So you're taking the easy way out. I should have known, Craig.
It's a great story. It's a great story. The top 2 teams, the redemption on one side, trying to get over the hump and get past Robert Morris, 3rd time going now on the other side. I just think that would make it for a great story to tell in the final. And I look for great stories. That'd be a phenomenal story to tell.
All right. So you've heard Craig's preseason projections. We want to thank you for joining us for this special NEC Women's Basketball Tip-Off Show.
You should thank them for putting up with us for the last however many minutes.
I don't know about it. It's probably a pleasure for them to watch me, you on the other hand. But with that said, it's an absolute pleasure. We appreciate you joining us for this NEC Women's Basketball Special. I'm Ralph Ventre. He's Craig D'Amico. We'll have the answers to all of these questions as the season unfolds right here on NEC Front Row. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the 2015-16 Women's Hoop season. It's back.